Good morning. Here are the headlines this hour. As many as 5,000 people are evacuated from Ukraine following a ceasefire agreed by Russia and Ukraine. And the UK Foreign Secretary announces new sanctions on Russian aircraft imports. Plus, we have more foreign businesses shutting down their Russian offices. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Let's begin with a live skyline shot of what a corner of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, looks like this morning. We'll be seeing that in a moment. The impact of the bombing and the shelling is not seen, but what a somewhat peaceful atmosphere, relaxed, pretty tense down there, as very little movement is seen in the pictures. We'll bring them to you as soon as we can. But now what's happened in the last 30 minutes or so, Russia's defense ministry claiming it has obtained secret documents proving that Ukraine was planning an attack on Russian-backed separatists east of the country. According to international media Reuters, the ministry has published 6 pages of documents that prove Kyiv was planning a military assault on the Russian-backed rebel regions in Donbass. Reuters cannot independently verify the documents, which appear to outline combat preparations for tactical units. Meanwhile, there are reports the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces says its Kyiv troop grouping was repulsing the enemy's offensive, inflicting damage and firmly holding their positions. Information was released in the force's latest operative information on key battlefield developments effective at 4 p.m. local time today. That statement adds that because of numerous casualties, Russia's military is continuing to conduct covert mobilization under the guise of holding training camps and is also intensifying efforts to recruit volunteers. Russia's military has not publicly commented on the reports. It's not been independently verified either. President Vladimir Putin has pledged that no conscripts will be sent to Ukraine.
These corridors.
Well, the U.S. has rejected Poland's offer to send its MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine via a U.S. airbase in Germany, saying the proposal raised serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. Warsaw made the surprise offer on Tuesday amid repeated appeals from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky for more warplanes to replenish his country's air force as it defends against invading Russian forces. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the prospect of fighter jets at the disposal of the government of the United States of America, departing from a U.S. NATO base in Germany to fly into airspace that is contested with Russia over Ukraine, raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. The U.S. was caught off guard by Poland's offer, which came in response to Ukraine's growing calls for Western allies to supply it with military jets to help fight Russia's invasion. Well, staying with Western response, the UK has announced more sanctions on Russia, this time targeting aircraft and exports of space and aviation technology. The measures announced by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss will give the government powers to detain Russian aircraft in the UK and make it a criminal offence to fly or land them in the country. Truss says the changes would inflict further economic pain on Russia and those close to the Kremlin. And Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said the UK is going a step further by making it a criminal offence for Russian aircraft to operate in UK airspace. Well, we're learning more now about the war in Ukraine as Russia continues its assault on Ukrainian forces. According to CIA Chief William Burns, Russian President Vladimir Putin planned to seize Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, within just 2 days. He was speaking at a congressional hearing on Tuesday. He warned lawmakers, "I think Putin is angry and frustrated right now. He's likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties. And he says Putin had been stewing in a combustible combination of grievance and ambition for many years. He described the February 24 invasion of Ukraine as a matter of deep personal conviction for the Kremlin leader. And in a moment, we'll be speaking to Stephen Hayes. He is the President Emeritus Corporate Counsel on Africa and who's now CEO, Cohen and Woods International Incorporated, Washington. He's also an expert on Russia and the Ukraine crisis. Stephen joins me from Washington. Stephen, thank you for joining me on the program this morning. And it does appear that we do not have Stephen just yet. But Chinese President Xi Jinping came out with his strongest statement yet regarding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, calling for maximum restraint and saying he is pained to see the flames of war reignited in Europe, according to Chinese media. He spoke at a virtual meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. According to China's CCTV, the three countries should jointly support peace talks between Russia and Ukraine to prevent conflict from spinning out of control. President Macron in the meeting reminded President Xi of the role that China must play as a member of the UN Security Council. China has refused to condemn Russia's actions outright, and last month abstained from a Security Council vote seeking to condemn Russia's aggression against Ukraine and demand it withdraw its forces. China has also offered to refer to Western sanctions against Russia as illegal. And in the meeting, Xi expressed concern over the impact sanctions have had on the stability of global finance, energy supply, as well as transportation and supply chains. The friendship between China and Russia strengthened last month when Russian President Vladimir Putin attended the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics. On the same day, both countries declared no limits strategic partnerships. There have been reports of explosions again in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, and surrounding areas. Journalists are reporting a series of blasts, air raids. Sirens are going off in the city again. Air raid sirens have gone off in Kyiv, Chernihiv, Lubny, Poltava, and Vasilkiv, according to several local Ukrainian media outlets. The alarm signal potential danger from airstrikes and are a warning to residents to take shelter in bunkers if they're not already there. The government of the northeastern city of Ukraine says a humanitarian corridor was opened earlier on Tuesday is set to continue today. Some 5,000 people were estimated to have left Sumy in 2 evacuations, according to the Ukrainian government. Sumy, near the Russian border, has for days been receiving fierce Russian bombardments. We'll take a short break now. We'll return with more on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Stay. Welcome back. We're still continuing our coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So far, we've told you more sanctions heading Russia's way from the UK, as these sanctions target Russian aircraft entering UK airspace. Also, we mentioned earlier, corporations are already shutting down in Russia. The Chinese president, who is also an ally of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, has called for maximum restraint, saying he's pained to see the flames of war reignited in Europe, according to Chinese media. He was speaking with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. We've also been reporting explosions in the capital, Kyiv, and in surrounding areas. Journalists there are warning of blasts going off and air raid sirens going off again and again, understanding how terrifying this is for many residents. The Sirens are going off in Kyiv, in Chernihiv, in Lubny, in Poltava, in Kyiv, and areas local to many of these parts. We understand that also refugees which have left Sumy might be taking some of these routes as they try to get out of the country. Those alarms signal potential danger from airstrikes. Now, a warning to residents to take shelter in bunkers if they have not already done so. Stephen Hayes joins me now. He's in Washington, an expert on Ukraine and Russia relations, as well as the ongoing crisis and the conflict happening in the country at the moment. Stephen, thank you for joining me on the program this morning. I don't... Oh, there we go.
There is no sound here. I'm trying.
Oh, now I can hear you. I can hear you now. Well, thanks for joining me, Stephen. And I'm sure that you have some thoughts on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. What is it the world is not seeing about Russia as it advances across across Ukraine? Apologies, we seem to be having problems with Stephen's audio. We'll try to fix that and get back to discussing with Steve. But Oladende Ariel, security analyst, is with me here in the studio. Thank you for joining me this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. I hope you don't have anyone in Ukraine at this moment.
I nearly secured Lithuanian passports.
Wow. But would you have lived there?
With this threat now, it would have been a disastrous decision. If you had worked out then, I probably would have moved. But as it is, it would be a bad dream.
Okay, well, that's a personal matter, your movement, so I wouldn't probe any further. But of course, you're watching what's going on.
Right.
And what's going through your mind as you're seeing, the way Russia is going about this war?
Thank you very much.
And the fact that civilians are kind of seem like the target here.
I don't see it as a Russian-Ukraine crisis. It's Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Because obviously they have everything. They're far more empowered than Ukraine, to put it that way. And that consciousness was behind the threat and the real action that Russia has taken so far against Ukraine. I agreed that Russia didn't want Ukraine joining NATO, but the fact remains that Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and whatever decision they felt they want to take must be in their own interest. Now, war or attack and massive destruction of this magnitude should have been the solution. They should have negotiated, which I think at the end of it all, that's where they will end. So it's not been a fair deal at all to Ukrainians. So many lives have been lost. The figures we are giving, they are estimations, because when the building comes down, in that situation, nobody has the chance to go and begin to count, undertake a body count. They just assume figures, And in this modern age, we shouldn't be experiencing so much carnage when we were searching for global peace.
Yeah, everyone wants peace. Even the Russians say that they want peace. We've seen them protesting on the streets. But is it possible to have peace now with what Russia has done? I mean, even if it decides to pull back from Ukraine, with all the damage that has happened already.
Damage that has been done to Ukraine, it may be a little bit difficult and tough. But as it is, they've taken the beating, okay? So it will be in their interest if Russia now brings the olive tree to embrace peace and begin to work towards reversing, if possible, as much as they can, because the damage is massive. I was in Damascus before Syria was bombed, and after the bombing, the images I saw on the television was very scary. Buildings that I knew, that I walked into, that I spent time in, and you saw them become total rubble. So where will Ukraine even start from now?
I know a lot of people are, finding similarities between what's happening in Ukraine and other conflicts that have taken place as well. And one of them, of course, is Afghanistan. But I think that, in modern day peacetime, it's a pretty scary situation. And
Absolutely.
the fear now is that Russia is not going to end with just Ukraine. There's a statement that the Russian president is trying to make. And some analysts have said it is not about taking over Ukraine. It's not about creating a new USSR. This is about Russian dominance.
And then trying to weaken Ukraine. Because there's no doubt about the fact that Ukraine has a robust economy, the biggest and the largest after Russian economy. And it has a far more better organized economy, whereby a whole lot of countries, even across Africa, they rely on Ukraine for so many things, from uranium to fertilizer and so many other things, including petroleum products as well, which all are being made impossible now. So at the end of the day, it will have achieved its intention, because Ukraine will have been brought down, to all the force. So they will have to start rebuilding their nation. Whereas on the side of Russia, I don't think they've recorded any serious damage.
No, because the war has been fought in Ukraine, that's why.
Exactly, that's why I said it's not a crisis, it's an invasion of Ukraine by a superpower, or a superior power, who thinks it has all it takes.
Yeah, but Ukraine is not the only one losing here, right? Even though this war has been fought.
I just told you that if I had moved to Lithuania and my friend who was going to another country, one of those small islands, we were like, oh, thank God we didn't move, because if we had moved with a threat and then the way it's bringing down on their necks, nobody is safe. He may wake up tomorrow and target any other country, and before the world will say anything, he will have hit the country. Unfortunately, you see the weakness of UN as a global body in charge of managing affairs, because I have not seen any serious move on their side to prevail, on Putin.
Do you think that's probably deliberate, or that's probably deliberate, isn't it? Because the UN is trying to stall a world war. And I think that's the main goal here. Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And they vetoed a resolution that was supposed to hold last week. And, the UN Security Council got together and said, yes, you may be able to silence the vote, but you cannot silence our voices. Okay. Many have accused the UN of being weak. I mean, we really wonder, what role the UN is playing in this. But we've seen humanitarian agencies on the ground trying to take care of refugees with medical aid and all of that. That's the role the UN is playing right now. But as to what you're saying, were you expecting the UN probably setting boots on the ground in Ukraine to help fight this? Doesn't that worsen the situation?
I expected them to have established contact with Putin on whatever platform or level, whereby they will persuade him to let him see reason why he should discontinue with the campaign. You see, because when you say you are bombing, you are killing people. I mean, there is no community without human beings. You won't have buildings everywhere without human beings. So when you bring down a bomb, or you drop a bomb on a city or a village or a town, you are killing people. And there is I don't now know what joy he derives from all of that, apart from the fact that he wants to weaken Ukraine.
You think that's his strategy? Wait, but to what end if he's weakening Ukraine?
He wants to be the dominant power in that hemisphere. Because by the time if Ukraine had joined NATO, it would be a greater threat to the Russian authority and might in that area. But as it is now, Ukraine will be busy battling and fighting to rebuild their country, okay? To give their people a new life, a new beginning now. I mean, the living ones. And while they are allowed to bury and mourn their dead, those ones that can be found anyway, because a lot have been buried under rubble and may never be found. So to that extent, he has achieved his intention. So if they will persuade him, like I said, reaching out to him through any platform.
But that's what President Macron has been doing. I mean, 2 days, I think, before this war started, the French president was in Russia. He had a sit-down with President Putin, and other global leaders have also reached out to him, like you're saying, and nothing has persuaded him. The Russian president has an agenda. He has a strategy to this. And if we've studied Vladimir Putin over the years, this is his modus operandi. He must have spent years planning this, and now he's executing this. He will not stop until he's done.
Achieves his intentions.
Until he's done. So these diplomatic avenues that you're mentioning, I don't know how effective they are. Do you still have faith in them?
We cannot leave him to his whims and caprices. Right away, they've had extensive damages done. As I'm talking to you, Damascus has not recovered, okay, since it was bombed by Russia. And if that has been like that, Ukraine has taken far more pummeling than what they had in Syria. So to that extent, it will take them much longer time to find their bearing. So it would be nice if, like you said, everybody was projecting that it may lead to a world war. But so far, common sense has prevailed.
You don't think we're still... You don't think the world is still under a threat of a war?
Absolutely, the threat is very present. It's staring us in the face. But to the extent that the other nations, NATO and all of them, they've not gotten into the fray, i.e. by sending bombs to Russia. Perhaps if they've been doing that, then Putin will no longer care. He might deploy nuclear weapon.
You might support a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
I wouldn't want that, because they may lose their sovereignty at the end of the day.
You're talking about stopping Russia.
Yeah.
You could only stop Russia right now militarily.
Remember that Kyiv was the original capital of Russia, the old Grand Russia. So that connection will always be there. It's like an umbilical cord thing, right? But I would prefer the world leaders now, the ones that they have the clouds, not to relent. There's a point you go in a war or in a fight or in a disagreement where you get tired, or you just choose, okay, out of maybe respect or something or compassion, you let it go. It cannot, if it continues for another week or two, then we may be seeing a third world war.
Do you really think that? Well, let's talk about the humanitarian situation, which you have been putting right in front, of all of this, and which is the number of people who are leaving. Nigerians are still on their way out of Ukraine. The last set of evacuations are taking place from Sumy, and those guys have been there for a while before, while the fighting and the bombings and shellings were going on. They're about the last people to actually leave Poland, Ukraine at this time, and are trying to head to the border. And we're hearing about, more blasts, series of blasts reported even in areas close to them on their way out. Yeah. What about the ceasefire,
In every situation.
Apparently, Russia is already violating that, and Russia proposed this ceasefire.
Right.
It was agreed between Russia and Ukraine, and another day of ceasefire has been agreed as well. Russia violated this ceasefire. Do you think it also amounts to war crimes, like Russia was asked to face the ICJ?
I think I read a report by the International Criminal Court or something that maybe they're making some moves, right, to start compiling charges against Putin. But for me, it's neither here nor there. In every war situation, there must be collateral damages. And that's how I see some of these things. Unfortunately, Ukrainians began to show their racism, okay, by the way they were treating not just Nigerians now, actually all the blacks, at the border of Poland. If you watch the video, inside the train, where a Ghanaian was asked to leave for an indigene. And of course, there were shouts of they were moving only the nationals away from the war zone, leaving non-nationals to suffer the fate. For me, it's a call, a wake-up call for Nigerian government, for them to know that, well, things have been what they should be here. Those 16, 17-year-olds who had to seek education in Ukraine would have been here. But because we didn't get it right here, and we are still not getting it right, that's why you saw them. When I saw the 17-year-old girl that said she had worked for 12 hours, my tears dropped. Because I imagined she could have been my daughter. And how will I have managed watching her on television, running through all of that? They've been so distraught and then traumatized that I doubt if they want to go back. Unfortunately, coming back to Nigeria again, for them it's a zero-sum game because they ran away because they couldn't find their level here. Now they are back here. So government has to do a lot more beyond just bringing them back and then giving them $100 as they did. You know, they still, I mean, they need to be rehabilitated anyhow. And then they should consider admitting them into available spaces in the universities in Nigeria so they can continue their education. More than each one of them are there, they're either studying pharmacy, medicine, or any of the medical sciences. So you can understand how great it would have been if that class of people were to have finished their education and returned to Nigeria in the face of the emigration of our medical professionals living in large numbers. So for Nigeria, it's not a good omen at all.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of them are concerned about their educational future. Some have even tried to, migrate to other countries to continue.
Some people say they're not coming to Nigeria.
Yeah, that's understandable. Unfortunately, universities are still on strike. ASU
Wow.
is still on strike, so that's quite a issue that they have to also face. But if we're going to relate this to Nigeria, I mean, we're also going through our own type of conflict here. I mean, we still have, those cases of banditry attacks and Boko Haram attacks in the northeast and so on. And here we are talking about Ukraine and, how they are standing up to the Russian troops. You have civilians who are standing up to the Russian troops. Now, we can't confirm that, Nigerians really wanted to go to Ukraine to go and fight. No, but really, I mean, that show of patriotism, you think that we could have anything like that here?
I can confirm to you that a lot of Nigerians who had no military training or combat experience are very ready to go and fight in Ukraine. I spoke to one of them who said, even if he gets killed, whatever entitlement that may belong to him will be sent home to Nigeria to take care of his family. That shows despondency. And then, of course, hopelessness, which for me, it's unfortunate. Now, I doubt if Nigerians will willingly want to fight, on the side of Nigeria in some of these cases that we have. Why? Because so much has been thrown into all of these wars, either in banditry or terrorism, over the years. And when you look at productivity against expenditure, they're not at par. We've spent so much money, and then we cannot see good results. Unfortunately, we also recorded massive casualties in terms of troops. So these are not what will encourage anybody to say, okay, I'm raising my hand to fight for Nigeria. So it will be best that the executive now, working with the legislature, will rejig the military, bring up new strategies, empower intelligence gathering, because that's the platform that delivers strategies to the fighters. So that way, we may be thinking of overcoming Boko Haram and every other insecurities that we have in Nigeria. But to think that the average Nigerian will want to go and join the army voluntarily like that, I doubt it.
Indeed.
The people are disillusioned already, okay? They're distraught, and then they're hungry. You must get that. The cost of living here keeps spiraling. This morning, heard that diesel is about 625, aviation fuel 570, kerosene is even no longer reachable to the poor masses, which of course is the only way, to get energy. They're now having to go to cutting trees and using sawdust. Those belong to the past ages, not this digital information age.
One of the lessons that we're learning from the situation in Ukraine. Mr. Oladende Ario, thank you so much for speaking with me. I appreciate your coming down here to talk to us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
And now we can bring you those live pictures from Kyiv, showing just a corner of the Ukrainian capital city. Those early reports of a series of blasts going on in Kyiv, Chernihiv, Lubny. There we go. The air raid sirens going off. At this point, people are expected to take cover in bunkers, in shelters. Those air raids off in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, as they expect more shelling. There have already been reports of a series of blasts in Kyiv, in Chernihiv, in Lubny, Poltava, and Vasilkiv, according to local Ukrainian media outlets. Moscow has announced another humanitarian ceasefire to allow civilians in cities under attack to flee, according to reports by Russian state media outlets. Corridors will again be set up for Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Mariupol. It begins at 10 a.m. local time. It's a third time ceasefire. Most have failed, we know, as that has been announced by Moscow. But yesterday, Ukrainian officials said they had managed to evacuate at least 5,000 people from Sumy, the first successful mass evacuation. Similar efforts have been made in Chernihiv, but they failed because Russia kept shelling the exit route, according to Ukraine. Also happened in the last 1 hour or so, fresh ceasefire in the northeastern city of Sumy is to begin shortly, we understand, to allow civilians flee to safety. Nigerians who were stranded there over the past few days since the beginning of the Russian invasion have been evacuated. They're well on their way out of Ukraine as we speak. 22 people we know have, including children, were killed in airstrikes in Sumy overnight. Russian state media said the corridors will be set up in the cities I have already mentioned. More than 2 million people have already fled Ukraine. The UN predicts that at least figures may go up to 5 million at the end of this war. Moscow says Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba will be meeting tomorrow in Turkey. Fighting does continue in north and in northwest of the Ukrainian capital. Just bringing you an update on the situation in Ukraine. Now, it is apocalyptic, according to the United Nations. The International Committee of the Red Cross has warned that besieged cities such as Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands of people are trapped, are running out of essential supplies. The United Nations Human Rights Office spokesperson Elizabeth Thrussell says her office has verified 1,207 civilian casualties in Ukraine, including 406 killed and 801 injured since the invasion began on February 24. She said the bottom line today is that the situation is really apocalyptic for people, and it's getting worse. They are running out of essential supplies, and so our call today is really for life-saving aid to reach these people, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. The European Union has also taken in 2 million refugees fleeing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Millions more will follow, according to the bloc's top migration official. Russian forces have subjected a number of Ukrainian cities and towns to devastating bombardment and left places like the port of Mariupol without power or water for days, putting to flight hundreds of thousands in the country of 44 million people. So, consumer giants, including McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Starbucks, have joined the list of firms halting businesses in Russia due to the invasion in Ukraine. McDonald's says it was temporarily closing its roughly 850 restaurants in Russia, while Starbucks says 100 coffee shops will be shut down. McDonald's says there's needless human suffering unfolding in Ukraine, and Coca-Cola has called the war tragic. All three firms say they will continue to pay their staff, though. McDonald's chief executive Chris Kempczynski says in a memo to staff, the conflict in Ukraine and the humanitarian crisis in Europe has caused unspeakable suffering to innocent people, and it would be impossible to predict when these businesses would be reopened.
The immediate message that McDonald's is sending with this move today is that they're not able to continue operating in Russia, and that is really something that makes it impossible to continue operations there. But I think the bigger symbolic gesture here is that when McDonald's moved into the Soviet Union, it was part of a message of opening up and building trust and cooperation between Russia and the West. And now those avenues have all been closed off. And so Russia's having McDonald's exit that market really brings a bookend, a close to that era. And we're kind of standing in, symbolically at least, a new era of division between Russia and much of the rest of the world. I think there is going to be a little bit of a noticeable hit to McDonald's bottom line. In their 2020 annual report, they had $500 million of assets denominated in rubles that they had to look out for. International business accounts for more than half of McDonald's corporate revenue. Russia is a smaller part of that, but it is a real part of it. So there is a real hit, but I think that by far the biggest part of the impact here will be symbolic, both to the McDonald's brand and also to Russia as a part of the international community and part of the commercial community.
We'll have more global reactions to the Russian invasion of Ukraine when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We'll be looking at the security and the economic impact of this war going on in Eastern Europe. But more sanctions, though, coming up on Russia. This time, U.S. President Joe Biden announced a ban on Russian oil and other energy imports in retaliation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. His aim, is that this would help corner Russia so that it can pull out of Ukraine. Underscores strong bipartisan support for a move he acknowledged would drive up U.S. energy prices.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. Since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, just since then, the price of the gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, it's going to go up further. We will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war.
Well, talking oil still, Britain will phase out imports of Russian oil and oil products by the end of this year, according to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, joining other nations, including the United States, in reducing their energy dependency on Russia. In response to President Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine, Britain and others are seeking ways to deprive Moscow of income and cut their own use of Russian energy exports by becoming more self-sufficient. Meanwhile, Bulgaria supports sanctions on Russia to halt its invasion of Ukraine. It says it may seek an exemption if a ban is placed on imports of oil and gas. The country's prime minister said in an interview that Bulgaria supports all kinds of sanctions against Russia, but says that his country currently has no alternative to Russian oil and gas. The United States is willing to move ahead with a ban on Russian oil imports to the United States without the participation of allies in Europe.
Bulgaria will support all kinds of measures because we are really against the war. But these two, maybe we would ask for an exception. In other words, we're not so, we just cannot have, we don't have current alternatives right now. We're too dependent. We were fully supporting the Ukrainian people. We're sending, we supported the first package of sanctions. We're even open-minded for other sanctions as well. Just these two sanctions at this point in time would be very hard for us to take as an economy, as a country.
Well, leaders still continuing to battle the outcome of tensions between Russia and Ukraine, and as it affects global oil supply and the supply of energy. Secretary General of OPEC, Malam Mohammed Barkindo, has called on global leaders, investors, and heads of governments not to politicize energy. The OPEC SG said this in an interview exclusively with Channels Television on the sidelines of the ongoing energy conference in Houston, Texas. He says the demand for oil and the challenge of the shortfall in supplies could be further exacerbated in political solutions if political solutions are not quickly put in place. Mr. Barkindo said the veracity of the climate change debate amidst a pushback for fossil fuel production can cause investors to take advantage of technology to decarbonize fossil production in a world that still has great appetite for oil and gas.
Energy. Now, are you concerned about sanctions? And if you are, to what extent will sanctions deny global citizens access to energy?
We are talking from historical facts, Olu. Sanctions have been placed on countries, on industry, during different periods in the past. But if you look at the efficacy of the implementation of these sanctions and the ability to achieve the objectives vis-a-vis the common good of the global community, more often than not, we see unintended consequences. In the current circumstance, yes, the global community has spoken against this invasion. We have followed developments at the UN. We have seen how the vast majority of nations rose against the invasion. But we must pause and think hard on the consequences of putting further encumbrances on the industry through sanctions. We are already faced with abject energy poverty in our own part of the world. We are already facing real obstacles to access investment capital in this industry, especially in our own part of the world. We should not further complicate the situation. It is not in the interest of anyone to politicize energy. It is not in the interest of anyone to worsen the energy poverty profile of the world. Nearly 800 million people have no access to electricity, most in our own part of the world.
Well, that was the business aspect of the impact of this war in Ukraine by Russia. To some sports news now. The International Gymnastics Federation is opening disciplinary proceedings against Russian artistic gymnast Ivan Kulyak for displaying a symbol of support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine during an event. The 20-year-old finished third in the parallel bars final at the Apparatus World Cup in Doha. Over the weekend, he displayed the letter Z in front of his outfit as he stood on the podium next to Ukrainian rival Ilya Kovtun. Kulyak said he had no regrets wearing the symbol, claiming during an interview with Russia Today that if given the choice, he'll do it again. Russian forces have used the letter Z as an identifying symbol on their vehicles in Ukraine following Russia's invasion of its neighbor. The English Premier League has suspended its agreements with Russian broadcast partner Okosport in response to the country's invasion of Ukraine. In a statement, the Premier League said it unanimously agreed the action with all its 20 clubs and it would donate £1 million to support the people of Ukraine. The league strongly condemns Russia's invasion and called for peace while sending their thoughts to all the victims. The £1 million donation will be made to the Disasters Emergency Committee to deliver humanitarian aid directly to those in need. And this this is how we close out this hour of our special coverage. For high spirits and boosting of morale in the recent days, there have been several viral videos of Ukrainians singing or playing music during the hard times. There was the pianist playing What a Beautiful World in the railway square in Lviv as passengers rushed by to board trains. And then there was a young girl singing Let It Go in an underground shelter. Here's another, a Ukrainian army band playing Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy in front of barricades showing the opera at the Ballet Theatre in Odessa. Bring a little light in the tunnel. We're still praying for the safe arrival of the Nigerians leaving Sumi. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.